This is not spending. It is target shopping. You walked in for toothpaste. You walked out holding a candle, a throw pillow, and snacks you didn't know existed 60 minutes ago. Sound familiar? Target clears over $100 billion a year, and roughly 20% of that comes from private label brands you didn't plan to buy, per a LinkedIn analysis by Jimmy Kim. That gap between what you intended to buy and what landed in your basket isn't a personal failure. It's the result of a deliberately engineered environment working. The wiring that got hijacked has a name. Knowing that name is the first step to seeing the mechanism, not blaming yourself for it. There's a name for that foggy feeling you get the moment you walk into a big store and completely forget why you came. It's called the Gruen effect. Behavioral economists named it after Victor Gruen, an architect who engineered retail spaces so visually overwhelming that shoppers lose their original sense of purpose. What's striking is that Gruen himself was horrified by what his name became attached to. He designed spaces for community. Retailers turned the blueprint into a, "Your brain isn't weak. It's just responding to an environment engineered to hijack your working memory." Recognizing the trigger is the only reliable way to keep your vote. Your brain isn't wired to handle endless novelty calmly. The moment it's flooded with colors, music, and signage, its decision-making bandwidth quietly starts to shrink. Retail expert Georgianne Bender told Business Insider that Target aisles are deliberately packed with stylish, on-trend items and fun signage, what she calls a high. This is cognitive overload by design. When your senses are saturated, your prefrontal cortex, the part that weighs cost versus value, quietly steps back and lets. That's the mechanism, not weak willpower. Your brain was simply handed more novelty than it could evaluate. Now you have a name for what was happening in that aisle. Business Insider documented what shoppers call Target syndrome, walking in for one thing, leaving with 12. But the why isn't weak willpower. Your prefrontal cortex runs the "do I actually need this" calculation? But it has a hard bandwidth limit, like a browser with too many tabs open. Dollar bins, seasonal end caps, color-coded displays, each one isn't decoration. Each one is deliberately opening another tab in your decision-making browser. By checkout, your prefrontal cortex is exhausted. That impulse grab isn't a character flaw. It's a depleted CPU defaulting to yes. Now you have a name for the pattern. That cheap dollar section right at the entrance isn't a bargain zone. It's a calibration device. It's there to quietly reset what feels expensive before you shop. Psychologists call this anchoring. The first price you see shapes every price judgment after it. Walk past $3 notepads and your brain files away a reference point. As one retail worker noted on Reddit, those front aisle spot sections are intentional impulse zones, engineered by category, not random clearance. The layout is so when a $40 item later feels reasonable, that feeling isn't a judgment. It's an echo of the $3 notepad you walked past 12 minutes ago. That's not your opinion. Behavioral economists have a name for what just happened to you in that dollar aisle. It's called anchoring, and it's one of the most studied effects in all of. The moment you touched those $1, $3, and $5 items, your brain quietly set a baseline. That baseline is the anchor. Now every price you see gets measured against it. So when you reach the $24 candle 2 aisles later, your brain doesn't ask, "Is this candle worth $24? It asks, "Is $24 far from $3? And $24 feels reasonable by." According to discussions on consumer psychology forums, front store bargain zones function as deliberate price anchoring zones. You weren't browsing, you were being. Now we reach the third layer, the one most shoppers never see coming. It's called the private label, and Target has built more than 45 of them. Cat and Jack for kids' clothing. Up and Up for household basics. Good and Gather for groceries. Favorite Day for treats. Each one feels like its own independent company they're not. Every single one is Target. According to LinkedIn reporting by Lucas Balassi, these 45-plus owned brands generate roughly $30 billion annually Here's the wiring at work. Your brain reads a distinct logo and name as an independent choice, a signal of variety and comparison shopping. But the shelf is curated by Target launched Good and Gather in 2019, and within 12 months, CNBC reported it crossed $1 billion in sales. Not a niche win, a full billion. The food itself didn't change the industry. There was no secret recipe. What changed was the packaging. Soft colors, clean fonts, a look that says artisan small batch. Your brain runs a quick shortcut. Beautiful packaging signals quality, care, and trustworthiness. Researchers call this the halo effect. One positive cue floods That's the wiring worth naming. You didn't overpay because you're careless. You overpaid because your brain read a design language and filed it under worth it before. Your brain doesn't just evaluate products, it evaluates the story around how you found them. Discovery feels different from being sold to neurologically. As noted on LinkedIn by Jimmy Kim, brands like Cat & Jack and Good and Gather are engineered to feel like discoveries, not store brands, triggering a warmer emotional. The mechanism. Cream tones and serif fonts activate aesthetic processing regions, which the brain associates with personal taste and identity, not corporate. So when you reach for Good and Gather and feel like you made a savvy choice, you did. But the feeling of discovery was designed. That's not a flaw in you. That's just... Fast Company calls it the Target effect. Shoppers mock pronounce Target in faux French. And that joke is actually the entire business model working perfectly. Affordable products dressed in the visual language of premium ones. Clean lines, muted palettes, elegant packaging trigger the same neural reward as an actual luxury. Your brain files the find under, I have good taste, not I spent money. That's the classification that bypasses your internal spending alarm entirely. The joke, oh, it's Target, is the tell. When you laugh at it, you're recognizing the trick. The wiring, though, fires before the joke ever arrives. Target stores handle over 96% of total sales per SEC filings, meaning the physical path you walk is their primary revenue engine, not an accident. Home goods and apparel sit between you and toothpaste by design. Every detour is a priming event. Your brain begins saying yes before you've reached what you came for. Psychologists call this the commitment and consistency loop. Each small yes lowers the cost of the next yes. By aisle 4, you've built a mental identity as someone. That coffee creamer you didn't know existed? You agreed to it 3 aisles back. The layout didn't sell you a product. It rewired your permission threshold without a... Behavioral economists have a name for this: commitment escalation. Each small yes trains your brain to expect the next yes to follow automatically. It is not a willpower failure. According to Business Insider, sequential small purchases create consistency pressure. Your brain is simply protecting a story it wants. By the 3rd or 4th item, you are no longer deciding. You have already decided who you are, someone who buys these things, and the cart is just confirming that. That is the wiring. Not weakness, not poor values, just a brain doing exactly what brains do, staying consistent with the person it already thinks you are. Target's Q2 2020 results landed like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. A pandemic, and yet revenue surged 24.7% to $23 billion, up from $18.42 billion the prior year. People weren't making more trips. Trip frequency actually dropped, but the basket size per visit ballooned. The system extracted more value from each rare, careful. That's the tell. A layout engineered for basket building doesn't need volume, it needs presence. One visit, properly routed, does the work of 3. The architecture. Your brain reads a bigger, rarer trip as permission to fill the cart. Scarcity of visits triggers a compensating impulse. That's not weakness, that's just how the... Fast forward to 2024, and something unexpected shows up in Target's numbers. The stores were still pulling people in. Customer traffic actually grew 3%. But here is where it gets interesting. CFO Michael Fidelke confirmed in Q2 2024 earnings that average basket size actually declined slightly. More visits, smaller. The environmental design still worked perfectly. The scent, the lighting, the sightlines all did their job. Shoppers showed up. What shifted was the moment of that gap between walking in and filling the basket is exactly where your wiring lives. Recognizing it does not make you immune. It just gives you a name for the... According to CNBC, Target's Q2 2024 earnings showed discretionary sales improving even as average basket sizes quietly shrank. That combination is unusual. Usually more shoppers means bigger carts. But here, people bought more categories and spent less per trip. That gap is where awareness lives. The dollar section, the boutique-looking private labels, the curated layout. Once you can name the mechanism, its pull noticeably weakens. That is the recognition. This is not about becoming disciplined. It is about having vocabulary for a pattern you could not previously name. That is the only thing that actually changed. Most finance content blames the store, the layout, the lighting, the checkout candy. But Business Insider's research points somewhere more uncomfortable. You. The research found the single biggest predictor of an impulse purchase isn't a retailer tactic. It's whether you walked in already primed to buy impulsively. The store doesn't create the impulse. It amplifies whatever internal state you carried through the door. Stressed, bored, or restless. The environment just turns them. That's the part worth recognizing. The vulnerability you're diagnosing isn't in the store design. It's in the emotional state you arrive in. The wiring was already live. Target didn't manufacture your impulse. According to Business Insider, retail environments amplify emotional states you already walked in carrying. Tired, restless. The store is just a mirror. Anchor pricing, private label branding, and curated lighting reflect your existing mood back at you and charge you for the reflection. The $90 cart isn't a lapse in judgment. It's a dopamine-seeking brain, slightly bored and under-recovered, meeting an environment perfectly engineered to feel like. That's the recognition. You weren't weak or careless. Your brain was doing exactly what tired brains do. Now you have a name for it. That changes everything. Here's the reframe that changes everything. This was never a discipline problem. As LinkedIn research shows, Target's environment is an integrated system. Layout: 4 invisible loops. The Gruen drift, price anchoring, the discovery illusion, commitment escalation. Were running quietly while you stood there holding a coffee, and you now have a vocabulary for something that previously had no name. That vocabulary is the actual tool, not a resolution, not a rule, not a budget app. Just the next time you walk in for toothpaste and feel the pull toward the home aisle, you won't need to fight it. You'll just notice it. And noticing, according to If this changed how you see money, subscribe for more wealth psychology stories.